All right, welcome everybody. I think we're going to get started. So appreciate everybody taking a few minutes on the agenda here to come to the presentation today. By way of introduction, my name is John Anders. I'm the CEO at Celect, and I'm going to be joined in a couple of minutes by Mike Relich, the COO of Lucky Brand. What I'm going to do just for the first couple of minutes is just give you a little bit of context around Celect and what we're doing to put into context some of the work that Mike's going to talk you through in terms of how he's been implementing advanced analytics, machine learning, and AI from a inventory optimization perspective. Mike and his team at Lucky have actually leveraged almost the full chunk of our platform as it stands today through the product lifecycle as you think about it from a planning, buying, allocation, and fulfillment perspective. And so I'm going to give you some quick context and then move on and give the stage over to Mike. First thing I want to do, and we're not gonna make this super interactive in this kind of format, but I do have a question for folks. How many people have seen the movie Back to the Future? Okay, so good Americans here. And probably some Europeans that have seen it as well. And specifically Back to the Future 2. Okay, so in the movie, Biff, the antagonist within the movie, at some point gets his hand, some of the time travel, back and forth, gets his hand on the sports book, right? He gets his hands on the almanac, and this is how he becomes, in the future, very rich and wildly successful, right? Because he steals it from Marty McFly and is able to make bets ahead of time because he knows exactly who's going to win. Now, if you're a retailer, right, and you're a merchant, you're a planner, you're an allocator, and you wanted to be the best allocator in the world or the best buyer in the world, and you had the ability to time travel, right? What would you do? You would probably go into the future, call it 6 months into the future, and you'd get the transaction list for what everybody bought within your stores. You'd understand trends. You'd understand what actually played out in terms of the market, right? And effectively able to predict the future. Now, you don't have the ability to time travel, right? But if you did, right, and you can understand, we've got a customer here in our Los Angeles store. We'll call the customer Susan. If I know ahead of time that Susan is going to buy the black purse on February 2nd in the Los Angeles store, right, and I know that for all interactions, customer interactions, and all customer transactions. I know that for online. I know that for in-store. Now all you have is just a math problem and just a logistics problem, right? Now you just have to figure out, and you can do just in time, you just get the products where that demand is. Now you can't time travel. You can't perfectly predict the future. But what we're focused on at Celect is helping customers be able to predict demand, leveraging the data that you have and bring all that data together, some external sources as well, to be able to help you identify demand for a specific product at a localized level, considering that both for in-store as well as an online capture area, at a specific point in time, okay? And so in order to be able to do that, there are two things that we need to be able to do well. One is to be able to do that demand prediction and build out that model. And the second is to be able to do optimization based on that, right? Because you're always trying to optimize. You only have so much space within a particular store. You only have so much dollars to spend from a receipts perspective on inventory. You have constraints around minimum presentation requirements, right? You only have, you might want to be able to optimize against where you're shipping products if you're putting in a ship from store strategy, right? And balancing and optimizing against shipping costs, time to ship, weeks of supply, so you're not pulling products out of stores where in 2 weeks you're gonna sell out of that product. Right, and so you have sin number one there, which is a lost sale. So all of those constraints, being able to optimize on top of that demand model, two things you need to be able to do very well. Where we've focused this is focused it across the product lifecycle. Yes, we understand the customer. We understand choices that customers make, understanding from a choice modeling perspective, right? But it's all in service of understanding product demand and how those products interact with each other, how they're when you've got transference between complementary products through a planning, buying, allocation, fulfillment, and even markdown strategy, right? At each step, helping the customers, the retailer and brands that we're working with, be able to identify at each step along the way when you're looking to make a decision in terms of which products to buy, how much of those products, and what assortments, and then how do you allocate those products to make sure that they get where the customer is at the time when there's demand for that product. And then finally, from a fulfillment perspective, where you ship it from, right? If when you an online order, you have this very valuable in-season lever to be able to optimize which store you fill it from to optimize inventory at the end of the cycle as well as markdown. We built this out into what we call our inventory optimization suite from a plan and buy, allocation, fulfillment, and markdown perspective. And Mike is going to talk through the plan and buy, allocation, and fulfillment with a heavy focus on the fulfillment and allocation perspective, which is the first two modules that they've gone live with. So without further ado, please allow me in welcoming Mike Relich, COO of Lucky Brand Jeans.
Thanks a lot, John.
Thanks.
Well, good afternoon. I know it's 4 o'clock on an afternoon, and it's the end of the show, so thanks for coming here. So first of all, I think what I wanted to do is actually kind of tell you a little bit about Lucky, because if you understand what problems we're trying to, how the company is and what problems we're trying to solve, it puts it in context. So Lucky is a brand that was established in 1990 in Los Angeles, California, by Gene and Barry. They were acquired by Liz Claiborne, but they had 12 freestanding stores. It was a small business. Liz Claiborne put capital in there, grew the company to $387 million, but it was a struggling brand. In 2014, the brand was bought by private equity by Leonard Green and my boss, which is Carlos Alberini, he was the ex-president and COO of Guess Jeans and co-CEO of Restoration Hardware. So when they bought the brand, it's a very, very strong brand. So they spent the first year trying to learn, okay, how does it operate? Because it's much different than Guess. Guess is a very international brand. This is a domestic brand. And then 2015, trying to validate how they operated. And then they found out the weaknesses. In 2016, it was really, okay, how do we grow e-commerce? How do we optimize inventories? And so really kind of putting a plan together to grow the business. Then in 2017, it was about transformation. So one of the big things we did is 2017, we enveloped on the customer centricity. So we said, the customer has to be at the center of everything. I mean, that includes all touch points, including allocations, marketing, et cetera. And we only had about 1.9 million people in our database. And as of now, we have about a little under 6 million. So we've really pushed that. But part of the thing is, the other big thing was really inventory management, because that's your biggest source of working capital, and you disappoint consumers if you don't have it in the right place, or if if you put it in the wrong place, your margins suffer. So looking at Lucky, it's a very, very strong brand. And the thing is, when I worked for Guess, it was always funny, because I would tell people, yeah, where do you work? I say Guess, and they would say, oh, they're still around? Or, oh, I used to wear them in the 90s. And I was, oh, okay, that's kind of a problem. With Lucky, I tell everybody, and they say, oh, I love it. And I said, well, make sure you shop. And I'm going to say all that to you. We have a store up here in Columbus Circle, one down in Soho on Broadway. So in your spare time, feel free. But seriously, we have an attractive and loyal customer base, which I'll go over. And we're multi-channel and with best-in-class distribution and wholesale partners. So we have department stores, we have an off-price channel, and we have about 260 of our stores, which I'll go over. And what's interesting about the leadership team is it's all people who've come from much larger retailers. So they're very experienced. And so looking at this, we have about 159 full-price stores, 92 outlets, we're in 1,050 wholesale doors, and we have about 375 specialty accounts. And so looking at the mix of revenue, about 39% is wholesale, 28% is specialty, and 19% is outlet. Then 2% is licensing, and we've been growing our licensing quite a bit. So Lucky is actually it's across all channels. All product categories, and a lot of that's done by licensing. So looking at brand awareness, Lucky, while it's small, we actually have an oversized awareness. So it's 77% for women aided, and 58% for men aided. Men are clueless when it comes to fashion, so you got to expect that. But actually, if you look at it, compared to our competitors, we're actually much bigger. And the best thing about Lucky is its customer base. So we have people, they're free-spirited, they like that California culture that we embody, but they're middle-aged, upper middle class, and very family-oriented. So what's interesting about Lucky is that you'll go into a store and you'll see several generations shopping. I mean, we'll have, it's not just the parents, they'll be buying for the kids, and so it's very, very democratic. And if you look at the household income, it's actually, these are quite affluent. There's a thing, when we look at these demographic profiles, we're basically in the top, our majority of our customers are in the top 4 of the Mosaic 71. So it's very, very affluent customer base. And then this is interesting because we have a very balanced mix in product categories. And this really goes to hold the allocation challenge because every product category, the way you allocate it, there's slightly different challenges. So if we look at it, we're about 18% of men's apparel, about 26% women's apparel, 22% men's denim, and 23% women's denim in retail. And in wholesale, it's actually slightly different. It skews more toward women's. But this, we need to make sure, we have very small stores. Our average store footprint is about 2,400 square feet. So, you obviously don't want to over-sort it. So you want to make sure you put the optimum, merchandise in there to maximize sales. So that's why the allocation challenge is really quite big. And this is an interesting chart. I'm sure you've all seen it because everyone talks, you think that the whole world was just all e-commerce. But then you wonder, why is Amazon, why is Untuckit, why Bonobos? Well, these guys all basically opening stores. And it's interesting because right now in 2019, only 11.3% of retail sales occur online, which means 89.7% are actually occurring in stores. And then let's fast forward to 2022. The forecast is that basically it's going to be 15.1% of the transactions being e-com, which still means there's basically 89% or 84% are still going to be in brick and mortar. So it's really, really important that we actually get those assortments correct. Now this is our system landscape. I'm not proud of this. It's because when we were a part of Liz Claiborne, basically we were running their systems and they were charging an enormous amount, or it was actually Kate Spade. And so we had 18 months to get off their systems. So we pretty much just went all cloud. So we're up almost 100% cloud rather than POS, and we kind of lifted and shifted everything over. So we run NetSuite for our financials, Full Circle handles our wholesale business, MicroStrategy in the cloud for reporting. And then of course we use JDA allocation as a front end, but then we use Celect for the analytics, which I'll get into. So, just really quick, I have to give the plug for the stores. So this is one of our flagship stores in El Segundo, California. It's and you can see it's actually merchandised quite new. This is our new concept. So you can see all the product categories that we're in and the challenge of how to allocate all this. And of course, we have a big licensing business. We're the licensee for Triumph. And so we put Triumph motorcycles in some of the stores, which is kind of cool. So looking at our strategic priorities, and I think this happens in retail. I mean, it's all about customers, about retention, about acquisition, about personalization and localization and store experience. The other thing is it's really about product. What assortments do you need? And the holy grail is basically having store-specific assortments. And I've been in retail 30 years. Everyone talks about it. No one's really been able to do it. I think with the Celect tool, this is the first tool that I've seen that you can actually do it economically without an army of people. And of course, product development speed, that's the holy grail. Distribution, same thing. It's really how do you keep distribution costs down? And we have a number of channels. And then technology. The omni-channel capabilities do you have? And actually, we're quite sophisticated. So about 40% of our e-commerce shipments come from stores. We actually do drop ship for Nordstrom's and Macy's. If you go on their site and you're buying Lucky product, there's a good chance that we're fulfilling it out of our distribution centers. And then we have some vendor direct. So looking at our long-range plan, what are our key objectives? So this is coming out from this year, and I can tell you. So where it's bolded is where Celect fits in. So Celect is a huge part of our strategic vision here. So one is, of course, we were established in 1990. Brands get old, so we want to make sure we can define and communicate Lucky's brand, because as younger generations of millennials come in, we need to make the brand attractive to them, because we have middle-aged and wealthy customers, but we don't want them to age out, right? So we need to actually to acquire new customers. Then, of course, we need to elevate our product aesthetic, which I think every brand wants to do, but it's really improve the product flow and implement assortment optimization strategy by channel. So make sure we have the optimum assortment, because that'll generate margins and that'll basically make sure that we have reduced markdowns. And then, of course, we want to grow things profitably, but it's really improved profitably by channel, store, customer, and product category. And how that happens is making sure that we buy the right categories, we buy the styles in the right depth, we make sure we put them where actually they're going to sell at the highest margins. I mean, that sounds obvious, but actually with Celect, believe me, I wouldn't be up here. The stuff works, and it's really helping us achieve that. And then, of course, inventory management, promotional strategy, we're going to do some stuff with them around markdown optimization, which I think is interesting. And then, these streamlined operations, I mean, these are obvious things. So just to talk about what challenges we had. Basically, I've implemented plenty of planning systems, but what ends up happening is the buyers end up sitting in Excel. They do everything in Excel, and then they upload it to the system. So the system ends up becoming a database of record. I wouldn't really call it a planning system. It's just really, this is a database of record, and then when I'm in in-season monitoring, you go in and you can actually see how you're doing. But what we really wanted was an automated system that was driven by analytics, because, I don't want to offend anybody, but computers can do work a lot better. Computers aren't biased, so they can actually do work a lot better than humans can. But we wanted to facilitate end-to-end planning, so we wanted to find out the pre-season targets. Make sure that what are our targets, what are our turn goals, how much do we want to buy by category, and then look at style planning and figure out for each style how deep we should go in that style. Because before Celect, what we were doing quite often was, everyone was kind of worried. So it's okay, let's buy 1,800 of this, 1,800 of this, 1,800 of this. So you really, unless a merchant really firmly believed in something, but that means if something's really going to work, you didn't buy enough in it. And then allocation, where do you put it? And it's interesting because I've been in merchandising in retail a long time, and a lot of merchants will say, "Oh, we're buying this item; it goes in the top 25 doors." And you're saying, well, why? No, believe me, And so, but there's no math behind it. It's just kind of a, it's a hunch from them. And I think with Celect, given their analytics, it really helped us to say that, let's look at each item, because, it might not be that top 75 doors that this item sells best in, which we'll get into. And then we want to reduce the total amount of inventory carrying costs, because, that is the biggest use of your working capital. And if you could actually fix that, it really helps out on the financials, and especially when you're owned by private equity. And the problem is our e-commerce is fulfilled by Radial. So we have a separate e-commerce warehouse. So in the planning process, we kind of had to figure, okay, well, how much do we put in Radial? And then if we didn't have the item, does it ship from a store? Or even our store DC. And then when you start taking the optimums, you want to optimize for split shipping. When you have an order of 2 items and the price points are $50 and you have to pay 2 shipping costs, it gets quite kind of costly. So what we really want to do is figure out how can we plan properly and make sure that we had the right level of inventory in the right place to prevent that from happening. And then we're a denim brand, so 50% of our sales come from denim in direct-to-consumer. And denims have the highest margin and the highest price points. So I always tell my people, look, you can basically, it's a lot faster with 2 legs than it is with 2 arms, so sell the denim. And then what we want to utilize attributes to influence the depth that we put in each store and the assortment allocation. And so one of the things that I think Celect does is very, very interesting is we went back and we attributed all of our historical data. And we had attributes before, but we made sure it was consistent. And then, they actually told us which of these attributes are statistically significant, which of them are predictive. And so then what happens is, as a new product comes on, looking at those attributes and what's sold at full price at location, they're able to actually determine, how much of that we should buy and where we should place it. So we really like that approach. And so, you see this, and everyone talks about big data, and it's kind of a laugh. You come out here, you hear it everywhere, but it's kind of like everyone says, well, let's use this big data, but we have no clue what to do with it. And I think the funny thing is, with Celect, we actually do know what to do with it. So why did we pick Celect? First of all, it's new generation technology driven by analytics and big data. But what's more important is, and this is what our team loved, it uses shuffling the deck, which basically means, think about it, most traditional allocation systems are like JD allocation. You pick a style from a work list line, and then you have some calculations either based on weeks of supply or last 3-week trend or whatever, and then you allocate that. And then you take the next style and you do the same. And so you're not doing it with context. So you can end up with, if you over sort, you end up with too many items in the store. What Select allows you to do is you can actually go through, let's say, knit tops, and we can select all 12 styles that we have, and then it allocates them in context to each other, so it knows what the cross elasticities are. And so rather than me over sorting the store because I'm doing one at a time in a vacuum, it does them all in context together. And it's really interesting because when we first went live, some of the planners said, like, oh my God, it's telling me in this 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica to give 50 units of this one color. And then before we'd never get more than 12. And I was like, I just do it. And the funny thing is the stuff sold through. So it's and it's really interesting because we had a lot of people who they were skeptical, and quite frankly, I'll get into it, but the skepticism went away. And then the other cool thing is this concept of over-recommending stores, which I alluded to earlier. So normally, when buyers buy, they buy for a store group, and this is an all-store buy, this is a top 15 store buy, etc. What Select does, it'll come in, and if you have the inventory, it'll tell you, no, we think this style should actually go to these different set of stores. And so it kind of breaks that paradigm. And there was a little resistance from merchandising because they said, oh my God, if we do this, one store could end up with all solids, and one store can end up with all stripes, and it won't represent the brand. And I said, well, who cares as long as the stuff sells? But there are some, you have to, there's some merchandising issues that you have to deal with, but it really hasn't been a problem. And then what we really like is the allocation decisions are being made real time, and they're product specific. It's not looking at a subclass, and saying, okay, well, what's the penetration in that store? It's really looking at the attributes of that particular style and telling you where that should go. And the cool thing is, a lot of people do store tiers, and they'll either do them, at department or a class, sometimes maybe subclass. Here, actually, those tiers are actually assigned at style level because it looks at the attributes and what have sold with similar attributes in the past and determines them real time. So when we talk about that concept of having store-specific assortments, this really allows you to get there without a lot of effort. And then where we've seen huge benefit and where the ROI actually, when we look at the total cost that we spend on the system, just this one piece has actually, we've met the ROI goals. So before, I said we had shifted, we fulfill 40% of our e-com orders from stores. And what was happening, it was a waterfall decision base. So, let's either go to this store and then, who has inventory, who's close, what store is close to the customer, et cetera. But what's happening is it was actually going to the stores with the most inventory, but those are the ones who had basically the highest demand elasticity and the ones that had the highest propensity to sell it. So it was kind of stupid if you think about it. We'd pick it, we would send it to the store, they'd unpack it, put it on the floor, then we'd pack it, box it back up, and we'd send it out. And then what was worse is a customer would walk in asking for the item and we're out of stock. So what Select has allowed us to do is use multiple factors, but including weeks of supply and customer proximity. And so what this allows us to do is it's actually taking the orders and it's pushing them to the lowest volume stores, the ones that we would have marked down the goods. And I'll go over some kind of results we have, but we've seen some very interesting results where our turns are increasing. We're getting a lot more of these fulfillment orders in the lower store tiers. The turns are increasing, and then we're seeing that we haven't impacted, the turns haven't changed in the top tier stores that we're actually acting as fulfillment. So it's really worked out well. So we implemented those 3 modules. So there's plan and buy. And so plan and buy we just went live with because we're doing our fall 19 season plans. And so, Target basically tells us, okay, where do we buy these, how much should we buy in, in women's fashion, in knits, in wovens, in denim, et cetera. So where at a high level should the investment go? And then what buy does is buy allows you to say, well, within each one of those categories, and if I look at each style, how much depth should I buy in each style? And what's really interesting is there was some, skepticism here, but overall, what the planners said to me is, their high-level targets are the same as ours. The difference is that they're telling us to put the investment geographically in different places. So maybe buy less in Canada, buy more in this region. So it's changing that, and it's changing the depth by style. But at a high level, the numbers are the same, which has given them a lot of comfort. And we went live with full 19 season plans on this. Now, Allocate, we implemented in the middle of August, and this was for fall 18 allocations, and I'll go over some of the results there. And then Fulfill, basically, we put in on 5/1, and here we've seen, we're on track to actually probably exceed what the ROI benefits are on this. And if I look at it, why did we reverse that? Because the thing is, when you look at making a big investment like this, you want to go and achieve your ROI as soon as possible. And so if you started with planning, the problem is that we're buying 9 months out, and you're planning almost a year out. So to sit there and go through the whole life cycle, by the time you figure out this stuff works, it's a year and a half or 2 years have gone by. So here we decided, well, let's go put fulfillment, because we know that we're not doing a very good job of selecting which stores to fulfill from. And we put that in, and then let's allocate. Now, we know we didn't buy perfect, because in the ideal world, I want to use Celect to figure out what to buy and how deep to buy. Then when it allocates it, it's seamless. Well, here, our planners decided what to buy with the old method, but then, maybe we bought too little or too much, but let's figure out where to put it optimally. And so we put that in August. What were the challenges? It's the timeline, right? Any software vendor comes in, the C-suite gets really, really excited, and they want it yesterday. And so the thing is, and you never really do enough due diligence, right? And I'm guilty of that too. So, but I think that happens with any product. Our fulfillment, that went in really quick. That was done on time. Part of the problem was we use Radial as a OMS, and they actually, I think, wanted to do something similar. And so, of course, we just, look, we got to integrate, and a lot of these vendors don't like to play necessarily, but we got that done. We use JDA allocation. The reason why, from a training perspective, we wanted to make sure that the allocation staff didn't have a different interface. And so the idea was, let's take the recommendations, we'll put it in the same UI, and they can either say, approve it, and if they don't like it, they could actually, they could change it. Now, the good news is they change almost none of it. And I'll go into the adoption here. And so, of course, integrating with JDA, I think it's the first time they did it, so that was a little bit of, that required some time. Our master data, from our system, because we migrated off of Kate Spade, we had different data, master data in multiple systems, and trying to marry that together and get it to them was a challenge. And then, how do you define success here? So, it's really what kind of reporting. And that was a bit of a challenge. And then the last one, my team made me put this in, which is, they talk retail speak, and anytime you're dealing with a software developer, they want rules, and sometimes it's a little bit of a challenge. So the implementation benefits. So we're for fulfillment, we're on track for actually hitting our goals. And when I look at allocation, because we've now allocated, fall, and then we've allocated winter, deliveries 1, 2, and 3, and now spring. But fall, and it's amazing because I run the store operations. I visit stores, and the first thing I say is, how's the replenishment going? And it's always, I hate asking the question because I know I'm going to get killed. And it's always like, oh my God, we sold this, we didn't get the sizes back, etc. So, right in peak season, I visited stores, and this is the first time that it's like, oh my God, it's gotten so much better. And what people said is, before you'd send the boxes, and we would wait till the staff came in to open them up, because I had 8 of this ugly top, and then sending me 5 more. Well, now they're saying, look, we can't wait to open every box because we know what's in there is going to sell. And the thing is, and we had a great fourth quarter. We comp positive. Our e-commerce was way up. So, and I attribute a lot of it to this. And then, for our first season, fall 3 was allocated, Select just hit the end of life cycle. So right now what we're going to do is, we're going to actually do some reporting. So we're trying to figure out, okay, how do I, quantify? I know it works anecdotally because, the stores are happy and, we're comping positive, our sellouts, our in-stock positions are higher. But really what we did is we looked and said, let's look at each store group and let's look at what the margins are and let's look at the spread or the variance between the best performing stores and the lowest performing stores. And we see that it's actually shrinking. So, that's how we're measuring this. And, we think that's an appropriate way to measure the effectiveness. And it looks good, but, we're in the middle of doing a lot of the reporting now. So our implementation lessons learned, I have an IT background and, I used to always have a, before I became COO, I had this mentality, well, just put the techie guys in it and put it in. And realize you can't do that. Because the techie guys don't understand the business. And so the best way to do it is actually to get a planner or an allocator who understands data feeds and really understands how data flows and who has IT knowledge. The integration, it's not difficult, but it's really how easy is it to get the data out of your systems. And what blew my mind was the adoption of the tool. Because I've been doing this a long time, and most times systems is always tell people, look, if it's going to take twice as long, do half of what you expect and cost twice as much, and if you're okay with that, let's go forward. Well, with this, it's not the case. I sat down with the allocation team a couple months after we implemented, and they loved it. And the thing is, we have new people. Those are low-level positions, and people turn. But the adoption is so amazing. Because people come in, oh, we love it. Because they can come in and their UI is great. They can select which items they want to allocate. And it's actually really, really compressed our training and it's very, very intuitive. One of the things that we have is, we plan based on cost. They're looking at regular price. And what we do is we plan, what's the ratio between markdown sales and regular sales. And so there's some adjustments we had to make for that because most of that's looking at, new receipts. And then, like I said before, the department recommendations are in line. What Select at the plan and buy level, it matches with what our planners like. It puts it in different buckets geographically and by business channel, but the total is balanced, which has really, really helped the adoption. And one of the positive things is because we started with fulfillment and we saw such good results, and then allocation we saw good results, it's helped adoption because you went to that area on fulfillment and it's not, there's nothing controversial about that. But when people see the benefits, and then when it comes into the allocation, which impacts their life, they were able to adopt it, and their attitude was much better. And then when it came to plan and buy, I think everyone says, wow, this stuff works. We have no problems using it, so the reverse order really helped a lot. And so what are we doing now? We're working through some enhancements. So we replenish by size in denim, and that's really driven our denim sales. With fashion, we don't. It's actually the style level, and then we use size curves within JDA to allocate. And it's really helped, but it's not as good. So we're actually putting size level enhancements in the next couple weeks. And then we want to actually modify. We're working with Select to use this as a basics replenishment because with a lot of denim, the basics, you're ordering monthly. And things, we did a very bad job on that, and our inventory turns were horrible. So we're working with them to kind of automate it, take the labor out of it, but make sure that we can reduce the weeks of supply. And the other thing, that we're working with them on is that, they handle markdown optimization. And it was kind of a secret to me. I had dinner with John, and he told me because I was thinking, we should be looking at, price optimization and figure out, how should we price our promos? We mark down, we're marking down shorts in Florida the same time we mark them down in New York. It doesn't make sense. And I was thinking, wow, these guys' demand curves, they should have all the data. And he goes, oh yeah, we do that with clients. And I was like, okay, great. So, that's the next thing that we're looking at. So what I have to say is that they're very open to their feedback. We had certain things on the UI that were taking extra time. We made the recommendation, they updated the UI, and we had huge time savers in allocation. And this is another thing that actually helped the allocators really embrace the system. And they're very committed to customer success. I can say their chief technical officer, he's a fully tenured MIT professor. And it's funny with him because you start talking about anything, and the guy thinks so fast it's hard to keep up. But he wants to come out with 50 million different solutions. So that's we just love it. And so with that, I think we're running a little bit over time. Thank you very much, and enjoy the show.
Thanks, Mike.